1986, Bradford City play Leeds United in a second division game at Odsal Stadium on the outskirts of the city. Odsal is not their usual ground, of course, but as the whole world knows, Bradford City are homeless because of one of the worst tragedies in the history of British sport. I watched horrified as fire engulfed the stand, but now, just 1 year on, I've been touched by the resilience of the survivors and those who are caring for them. Side of the ground. One hopes the stand doesn't burn down, but now that fire is beginning to rage. But a day of triumph could turn into a day of disaster here for Bradford. As that blaze grows, the stand has to be in jeopardy. And this is where it happened. There were so many ironies that fateful day. For a start, the old timber stand, which was packed to capacity, was due to be reconstructed within 48 hours of the game. It was the biggest crowd of the season as the city of Bradford turned out to celebrate the club's promotion to the second division. And I was here, perched just on top of that low stand, to do the television commentary. And that in itself was an irony. I've been very fortunate. In 25 years of sporting journalism, I've travelled the world. And yet, the most unforgettable experience in all that time happened here within 5 miles of my own home. Those horrific pictures of the fire went around the world, and the hearts of people around the globe went out to Bradford and its mourners that weekend. But our story... The same thought sustained Bradford City's chairman, Stafford Higginbotham. On his shoulders fell the huge burden of the club's responsibilities. I wondered how he'd borne the grief.
Immediately following the fire, and at the time of the inquiry and then the inquest, and of course immediately following the fire of the funerals to attend, I probably had 3 months of having more activity than in any other 3 months of my life. So I didn't really, I was never really up against the situation of having nightmares or having to think about what had gone, because it was, I regarded it as my responsibility to take the situation on and to develop it from there. So it would be wrong for me to say that it has ever affected me in that way that it hasn't. But I'm a very resilient character and realised that there was an awful lot of things to do, and the sooner we got on with doing them, and the better it would be, not only for ourselves but for the people who had been injured.
But it must have been a very harrowing year for you and your family. What was your lowest point?
My lowest point, John, was my father-in-law. He'd lived with me for a number of years, and had been a good pal of mine for 20 years. And due to the pressure of the media who were hounding us and coming home and talking to him as an old man when I wasn't in the house, he had a stroke and he was totally paralysed some 5-6 weeks after the fire, and died in October. And that was possibly the lowest part of that I was, because that obviously affected me in a very personal way.
We know about the poison pen letters. We know there has been graffiti scribbled in the city. I mean, has there been a great deal of personal animosity, do you think?
No, I don't think there has. I think a great deal of the graffiti and the like has been done for reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with the fire or with the tragedy. I think there's a personal vendetta has gone on against me, and this has been one way of showing it. But I mean, that has had no effect upon me, because it's just silly and and pointless.
So what of the future for yourself and for Bradford City?
I've got to look forward in a positive way, as have the people of Bradford and the people who support us. And the truth is that whilst it's been brought about by such a tragedy, the club will have a ground, although it's very modest by comparison to other cities of our size. It will have a ground for the very first time in its history that in some way goes towards creating a stage for the enjoyment and the entertainment that we hope we can find for the club.
I came back into the ground when they were still dousing it out and the police were here, and it was upsetting to see the police crying. You don't often see policemen crying, but they were crying, and you knew then that something was very seriously amiss. Not that you don't believe it, you just don't want to believe it. You don't want to believe that people were going to die or had died or been badly maimed, especially on a day when you should have been celebrating. My wife and kids were out fine, but my wife was hysterical. You know, she just crying and crying. And I think the days that happened afterwards as well, you know, you go to church, fine. I think that was fine. You know, when every time you went to the church, you felt okay. But, you know, when you saw other people who had lost, you know, family, lost their wives or their husbands, that's when it hit you hardest. And, you know, you'll never get over that experience. Football, as anybody will know me, knows that football is my life. But I've also realised that there's life outside football, you know, and sadly that was taken away from some people.
It must have been very difficult to sort of motivate the players at the start of the following season, when it must have still been on the minds.
I think the players, nobody gave the players a lot of credit really for working so hard during that summer. They went to everything that was asked of them. Every time anybody had a cheque that they raised, the players went and picked it up. And nobody ever said to them, "Oh, thanks very much for what you've done." They just expected it of them. And the players expected to do it, and they were great. John Hawley, who we gave a free transfer to on that day, or the days preceding it, was coming over from Beverley, probably once a week, twice a week, just to do these things, you know, and nobody ever said to John Hawley, "Thanks for what you've done," you know. I think John collected something like about £12,000 on his own for the fund, which was great. And there's a player just been given a free transfer by the football club, you know. So footballers aren't all mean, you know. The players did try at that time, but for some of them, they were too young. They didn't realise what had happened, you know. Even when they came back to pre-season training, they hadn't realised. You know, that it'll always be remembered that day. They're part of history now. You know, it's the wrong type of history, but they're part of it. We're reminded of it in that myself and Trevor go and stand on the terrace and watch the game, the reserve games. And sometimes when the other team are kicking the ball about and it goes up onto the terrace and one of their team will go up and collect it, you think to yourself, I wonder if you realise, lad, what happened there? You know, they obviously know there's been a fire, but they don't. It brings it all back to you. That's where the fire started, just in that part of the ground, you know. You look down, you see a nail that's burnt out on the floor, and it brings it back to you. And sometimes when you're out on the pitch, because we use it mostly now for training, and you look up, and you just daydream for a while, and it soon goes from you, but it's never forgotten.
With that in mind, do you think it's right that Bradford City are going to build a new stand on that site?
Certainly, yeah. It's the best thing that could happen for the people that died, for their families, for those that have been burned. You know, this is where they came. This is where they enjoyed coming. You know, it's part of their life. It's part of their families' lives. Some of their families will never, ever want to come here and will never, ever want to remember. But I think we owe it to them. We've got to keep playing here and keep doing our stuff here and keep winning for them. You know, when I used to walk along from down the tunnel along to where we sit in the dugout, you could see the faces, and you got to know them over the years. Used to be a little girl with a mother. Used to bring me a birthday card, Christmas card, little kiss on the cheek before every game. Old couple used to stand next to the dugout. It'll never be the same as that again. You know, you wished you could bring it all back and they could all go and stand there again, but it'll never be the same again. But it's memories. You know. It's memories.
Those memories will fade, especially as everyone is now looking to the future. At Valley Parade, a new stand is to be built as a memorial to those 56 people who lost their lives. As for the young team, this season's moderate place in Division 2 must, with hindsight, seem full of promise. For the survivors, it's been a year of healing, but for them too, it's only a beginning.